many small shops are already dark, and in the past few weeks, HMV has issued a profits warning, so have Dixon's, Odd Bins has gone into administration, thousands of pubs are set to close, and when economists see these signs, they too get nervous.
I think we should be worried. I mean, it's quite clear that consumer confidence has taken a major dive since Christmas, and that's certainly what retailers are telling us. We're seeing a significant decline in consumer spending. People are seeing a fall in real wages, so quite clearly spending is going to fall. So there is a big risk to the recovery.
Real disposable income in the UK fell last year by 0.8% for the first time since 1981. But if you measure falling incomes against the combined impact of price rises and tax rises, the picture becomes stark. The real economic crisis for households is far from over and may be about to get worse. The retail downturn has left a whole bunch of famous names, including All Saints, the fashion retailer, struggling. But there's supposed to be a silver lining. The British economy is supposed to be in transition from reliance on the high street to more of a manufacturing and export-based economy. The problem is, evidence for this so far is scant. UK manufacturing had been growing well in 2010, as here at Swindon's Honda plant. But this month has seen a sudden slowdown, not helped today by the announcement that this production line will go on a 2-day week. The town was hit hard by the Lehman Brothers crisis, and now they're being hit hard again.
There was a massive fallout in manufacturing, and Swindon's very dependent on manufacturing. There were thousands and thousands of jobs lost. That stabilised for a while in 2009, 2010, but we've still got a lot of closures that have been announced, and there's more redundancies on the way. So whilst there was a little pickup in the local economy, there are still jobs going in manufacturing, and so things don't appear too bright in the immediate future.
So, for many, it's agency work and the job centre.
At the moment, I don't really think there's much out there in Swindon. The only time you're really, almost guaranteed to get work is at Christmas, and even then it's only for a couple of months, and then right at the end they go, all right, cheers for that, see you later.
And there's frustration.
Whereas we went to college to get some further education, which wasn't really worth it. That's how I feel, that I'd done it for nothing.
This is what it looked like the last time we had a year of falling real incomes in 1981. This time around, there's a rising scratchiness on the streets, political violence from the left and the right, and politicians are beginning to worry how much people can take. After 1981, the last time we saw falling real incomes, Margaret Thatcher and then John Major were able to deliver year after year of rising real incomes. That plateaued out a bit after 2000 and was largely replaced by rising debt. And now we're here.
We have to go back to 1977 to see a bigger drop in real disposable incomes than we had last year. But on that occasion, there was a big catch-up in 1978, 1979. There was a level of bargaining power that allowed workers to defend their wages. Well, this time around, that just doesn't exist. Not in the private sector, or not even in the public sector.
For Britain's workers and consumers, filling up the pubs as the sun shines, there's a growing amount of sorrow to drown.
Well, to explore how the country is likely to respond to the squeeze, I'm joined now by the Conservative MP Jacob Rees-Mogg, the novelist Will Self and the Guardian columnist Polly Toynbee. How do you think the mood of the nation is? I mean, is it a bit, we know there's a problem, it's got to be fixed, we're going to get through it, keep calm and carry on?
I think a lot of people are going to get quite a shock this month. If they don't read newspapers, which lots of people, alas, don't, they won't quite know what's going to hit them. For instance, if you're a mother whose childcare credits are cut by 10%, you were working in a low-paid job anyway. That 10% may be just that much that tips you over the edge, that it's quite impossible to work. You'll have to leave your job, you'll have to give up that childcare. They may not realise this until they get their pay packet and suddenly find they can't pay their childcare this month. And I think there are a lot of people who are going to be hit really by surprise and very shocked at what happens.
Well, do you think we haven't really quite got it yet, many of us?
I think there are all sorts of reasons why we haven't got it yet. I hear what Polly's saying, and I think that is going to happen. And I think it's largely going to fall on the people who are not just more than one generation removed from the kind of solid organic structures that the working class in this country used to have before the kind of decimation of the union movement. So they're people who are kind of wholly disenfranchised, and that's why we haven't heard their voice yet. There isn't.
Because there's no way of expressing
Well, there's no
it.
way of articulating or expressing it, and I think that in the coming months, and as these cuts start to bite, you are going to have a lot of very angry and frightened people. But how they're going to find their voice, I'm not quite sure.
Do you buy that?
I think it's undoubtedly a very difficult situation, that the government doesn't have any money and therefore cuts have got to be made. We have to live within our means. As we saw in the report, it is the highest earners who are going to pay the most. The lowest earners have been as protected as possible. There is a tax cut for 23 million people. So the government's certainly taken steps to ameliorate it. But I think there's no pretence that the economy is in a difficult position.
Do you think the question of fairness, that being seen to be fair, is vital here? I mean, people will disagree whether it is fair or not, but do you think that's really important to be able to say we are all in this together and for people to buy that?
I think it's genuinely true, and we've heard the figures today that the top 2 deciles, top 20% of income earners, are the ones who are most hit, and on average the next 80% are not going to be hit. And I think that's right, and I think that's fair.
The IFS has said that's entirely not true. They've come out today and said actually that's not so. The picture is, yes, the top 1 to 2% have been hit very hard, but if you look at the rest, the budget was regressive. The bottom 10% have been hit hardest, apart from that tiny number of very, very rich people at the top. I mean, and all the way up the scale, it is regressive. The less you earn, the harder you were hit.
But people do get, do they not, that we have had this party, we have to pay for it, and we understand that. We all understand that.
But they also get it that it's unfair. It's very interesting looking at both the Mori polling and the YouGov polling. People are saying overwhelmingly, this is very unfair. We are not in it together. They hear people like Jacob speaking, and they know now it isn't true.
There is mixed polling. There is quite a lot of polling of people saying that they knew too much was spent and something had to be done about it. I think
but they don't think you're being fair. They think it's very unfair.
Very realistic. Most of the tax rises fall on the richest.
Well, I think people should stop using the word fair, which has become a shibboleth to hide all sorts of malfeasance and all sorts of bad faith. I mean, it is sort of meaningless to talk in terms of fairness if you are in one of the top 1 or 2 percentile of income. I mean, what does it mean? I think that people, I have to say, I think there is a sense in which people were aware that the settlement under New Labour, the kind of modus operandi of New Labour, couldn't sustain. I think people had an unconscious awareness that you cannot live off an asset bubble indefinitely.
I mean, we can argue about the polls till all the cuts come through, but it is true that many people still blame the Labour Party for what's happened.
I think they do, because after all, Labour left a huge debt behind, but the fact was that the debt was there to stop the whole financial system going bust. It wasn't because Labour overspent. And you shake your head, but of course your party were absolutely committed to following Labour's cuts and spend step by step. Cameron was completely committed to the same spending until the crash, and then of course Labour, the big spend was in stopping the ATM machines actually coming to a halt.
The IMF said that we have an 8% structural deficit, which is one of the highest in the world. Even the Shadow Chancellor has admitted that there was a structural deficit, which we've got to get down. We cannot live on the never-never.
Even if people agree with you, how long is it going to be before they blame you? Because the Conservative Party with the Lib Dems are the government, and it won't take very long before people say it must be your fault because you are in power.
I actually think the British electorate are very realistic, and they understand that you can't turn an economy around on a sixpence, that it takes a long time, not just to change the budget, but also change the obstacles to doing business and the deregulation programme that will allow the economy to grow, because a lot of this debt problem will eventually be dealt with by growth.
That's an interesting assessment, again, of the national mood. I mean, do you think there's going to be trouble in the streets?
Well, I don't think that is an assessment of the national mood. That's a prescriptive statement about just doing the same thing again, as we did under Thatcher, creating tax-free zones, trying to turn us into more consumer-driven economy.
There was trouble in the streets,
with the mood of the people.
But I'm not sure that was economic. There were all sorts of other factors at play in Brixton and so on at that point.
I mean, do people, because you were suggesting at the start of our conversation, many people don't have a way of expressing.
They don't have a way into it.
But they don't have a way of protesting either exactly, do they? Because you know, trade union power is less than it was 20 years ago,
Absolutely.
and so on.
They don't have a means of articulating it. If you do go back to the early 80s and you go back to the protests against Thatcher, that you look at Orgreave or you look at the dockers' strike in Liverpool, that was within established structures and institutions, and there was a way of not only generating protest but generating sympathy for protest.
I wouldn't count on it. And we've just had 500,000 people gathered together in extremely, this was really mainstream Britain.
Yes.
People came from everywhere, 600 coaches from all over the country, 9 special trains, and you know, these were
and all they got was to be addressed by Gordon Brown's quondam speechwriter,
Well,
who was heavily implicated in this mess to begin with.
I think the people who were there...
until Labour cleans out its own organ stable, it's not going
Well,
to...
I'm not here to defend Labour. I'm just saying that I think that it was a real feeling of solidarity and a very strong sentiment, of really deep upset at seeing public services being ripped up. The other thing that's going to happen now, for the first time, people are actually going to see Sure Starts close. Up until now, it's been, going to close. You know, 250 Sure Start, the door will shut from now onwards, and the libraries and the swimming pools.
So,
and when people see it made
you
real...
ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, there was
the
massive
thing.
waste in government expenditure that had to be brought under control.
But if you feel you're paying for it through Sure Start, but if you feel you're paying for it through Sure Start or your personal family circumstances, that is going to be a problem.
I think people do recognise that the last government spent all the money, and that therefore there are going to be difficult times. And personal debt rose enormously. It rose from 200 to 450% of GDP. People know from their own financial circumstances that they've got to pay off debt, the government's got to pay off debt, and therefore we are going to be living at a quieter level than we were in the boom years.
Quieter level in the boom years.
I suspect that when things start to bite, it'll be a case of a pox on everybody's houses and working out a way to kick in the front door.
Thank you all very much. And staying with the economy,